Yeah, test, test. Say something. Words, things. Okay.
Great. Look at that. Awesome. Cool. Thank you. And just make a tab.
Yeah.
I will do. Yeah. Well, I will not go to your history though.
That's fine.
Seems good.
It's
okay.
It's not mirrored anyway.
Oh.
So you're fine.
Can I just drag this?
You can hit it to mirror if you want.
Yeah. Okay. What? Impossible. Okay. So, for all of you who haven't come here before, welcome to Ember NYC. We've got a couple announcements, and then we're going to have 3 talks that we have tonight. The first one is going to be Robert Wagner, who is going to give us a talk. We will have Ollie Griffiths, who I don't think is actually here yet, and then Dianne. Oh, hey, there he is. And then Dianne is going to give us a talk to wrap up the evening here. A couple announcements before we get started. For those of you who's going to EmberConf this year? Pretty good. If you're not going to EmberConf and you would like to go to EmberConf, there's still time to get tickets. It is a fantastic event. You will meet people who you will see over and over again in the Ember community, and I encourage you to attend. You see ShipShape Robert's company is even sponsoring. It's pretty great. Some other things that are going on in the Ember community right now that you might want to take a look at. Over at Ember.js.com, you can see this link to the 2019 Ember Community Survey. If you have not taken the Ember Community, I won't even ask for hands because I know everyone here has taken it. But just in case you know someone who hasn't, please do contact them and let them know that they should take the Ember Community Survey. I think a fun challenge would be if you can try and think of someone in the next 10 seconds. I'll give you to quietly think about it. Think of someone who you know who uses Ember that nobody else in this room knows. Yeah? Okay, that's the person you should email and tell them to go do the survey, because that's how we get responses. And the survey is pretty useful. It helps us figure out things like browser support. It helps us track things like how we're doing on diversity initiatives. It helps us understand what things people want out of the framework in the next year, and helps us decide what to do for the next edition of Ember after Octane and for Ember 4.0 and things like that. Another fun thing going on in the Ember community that you might not have seen, this one's a little bit harder for me to pull up with the URL, but there is an excellent Ember.js documentary. Oops, I'm butchering typing, but this is something that was actually done by honeypot.io. And this was a project that I think they wanted to do for a couple different open source projects, but they started off with Ember. And people have said that this is a really enjoyable documentary to take a look at. It talks about the history of Ember, but also just a little bit about what some of the people in the Ember community have as opinions around open source, how to build a project that sustains through many years and challenges like that. It's supposed to be pretty engaging stuff. Who's already seen it? Yeah, so it seems pretty fun. I encourage everyone to give it a watch. It's enjoyable. 2 other announcements. Thanks, Movable Inc., for hosting us here in this delightful space. Yeah. As they have done many, many times. You should check out their product if it is useful to you. And if not, you should check out their hiring site if and when you are looking for a job, Aaron. And next month, we're still looking for speakers. Next month is going to be a little bit funky for Ember NYC because this event would be the week right after EmberConf. So, people are probably pretty into Ember. If we think we've got enough people interested in doing a kind of wrap-up, what we've done in the past, we've had people who have attended EmberConf go ahead and try and summarize talks, which I think is an interesting challenge for themselves to try and really digest what they learned and represent it to people in a more condensed, quick format. If we're interested in doing that, is anyone interested in giving a presentation? Basically choosing one talk that they see at EmberConf and giving a 10-minute summary of it? Yeah, so we've got 3 or 4 volunteers, and maybe we can rope a couple other people into it. So we'll probably be doing that at the very least for the next meetup. And I think that's about it. Robert, if you would like to reconfigure your computer now that I have totally messed everything up for you.
Matt, you should open up for announcements if people have anything
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. If anyone has other announcements that they'd like to do, hiring announcements or anything else?
I'm giving a workshop again on Gracefully and integrating Gracefully into your Ember CLI build pipeline. If you want to come and learn more about it, then do come. It's on Monday at 2 p.m. I think, or 1 p.m. the afternoon session. At EmberConf. At EmberConf.
Can you just repeat that for the stream? For the stream, can you repeat that?
Yeah. Oh, what? Well, all I said?
Yeah. Or just take this off and hand it.
Oh, I'm sure. Sure.
Yeah, we usually just use it, like pass this around.
Should I get it on the stream? Or should I be
Sure.
faceless voice?
There you go. Talking to the mic.
Hello, everybody watching at home. And again, for the group, I'm going to be doing a workshop on Monday, the 18th at EmberConf on Broccoli.js and integrating Broccoli and Broccoli plugins into your Ember CLI build pipeline. So if you've ever thought, I really want to be able to do this as part of my build, but I don't know how, come along, come check it out, come learn stuff. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Cool.
Actually, a very similar theme. I'm doing a workshop at EmberConf about building a sketch-like WYSIWYG tool, but actually next Wednesday here, I'm going to be doing a stumble through of that workshop. So if anyone here is interested and would be willing to give feedback in coming to that workshop, please find me during one of the breaks or afterwards, and I can get you on that list for this. Cool.
Any other takers?
Sam, do you want to tell people about your workshop? It's the theme. Where was Sam?
Oh. Camera here.
It's okay?
It's perfect. Yeah.
Hello. My name is Chris Wong. I'm director of NYC Planning Labs, which is a very progressive government digital services team at the Department of City Planning for New York City. I brought stickers. We have 2 open positions right now. One is for an interaction designer and one is for a full stack developer. But pretty much everything we do is Ember based, and we're doing really, really progressive stuff with Ember, Mapbox.gl, and sort of next century or next generation spatial stack, all mixed in with Ember. So check out Planning Labs at NYC and get a sticker.
I'm going to do. We also are giving 2 workshops at the conference, which we do every year and regret the night before, but, you know, it works out. We're doing robust data fetching, so we're going to be talking about best practices for Ember Data and some ideas around declarative data fetching. And we're also doing real-world animations, so we're going to be talking about CSS animations, animations with liquid fire, and then we're also going to dive into Ember animation, which is the new kind of animation library that Ed previewed last year at EmberConf that kind of supersedes liquid fire. So, yep, those are our 2 workshops at EmberConf.
Wow. New York City people should be pretty proud. I feel like we're really representing on the workshop day at EmberConf. It's pretty cool. For our first talk this evening, Robert Wagner is going to be presenting for us. He runs a consulting company called ShipShape.io. He traveled up here from Washington, D.C., which is pretty generous of him. And yeah, he's been a member of the Ember community and a contributor to Ember like really intensely for the last 2 years. So please give a warm applause to Robert.
Thank you. All right, so this talk is Ember Data. It's not just for JSON API anymore. And as you might guess from the title, it talks about using Ember Data with things other than JSON API and non-standard specs, like if you don't follow REST or JSON API or things like that. This is kind of a preview to a BonusConf talk I'm doing at EmberConf, which is, if you don't know about BonusConf, it's before EmberConf, the day before. So if you're not going to all of these workshops and you want to come check this out, there's going to be a few people giving talks then as well, and I still have tickets to it if you need them. So let me know. So I'm Robbie Wagner. You've probably seen me around Slack or Discord or GitHub or various things as RWWagner90. That's my handle on everything, everywhere. I run ShipShape, as was mentioned a few times. We do a lot of Ember stuff, so if you need help with your Ember apps or have any questions about Ember or just want to talk about random Ember stuff, we're always around. Hit us up. Some of the things that I've worked on are Ember Math Helpers and Ember Shepherd are kind of some of my bigger add-ons you may have heard of. Ember Shepherd wraps Shepherd.js, which we just released a 2.0 of like a few months back. So please play with that if you need some site tours for your app. And I've been working a good bit on Ember Inspector recently as well, trying to get everything in good shape for Octane, and hopefully we'll get there eventually. So, who here has used Ember Data before? Okay, most people. It's kind of what you're expected to use, I guess, if you're using Ember. It's very built in. For people that haven't used it before, that may watch this, or if there's anyone that didn't raise their hand, it's just a library for using data in Ember, basically. I took this from the README of the project. It says it's designed to be agnostic to the underlying persistence mechanism, so it works just as well with JSON API over HTTP as it does with streaming WebSockets or local index DB storage. So this is kind of true, I guess, if you want to do lots of manual work, but it works a lot better if you use JSON API or REST standards, because there's built-in adapters for that already. Things just work really well. But, so what is JSON API? Another good explanation from the website, a specification for building APIs in JSON. That's really surprising from the name. So it incorporates a lot of nice things, though, like links and relationships that you can use for like pagination and side loading data with included, and various other nice things that you want to have for your API so that everybody can use these nice things and use it with Ember Data and all that kind of good stuff. And if you didn't know, Yehuda Katz has been very into the JSON API spec, and that's probably why it's been used in Ember Data so much. I don't have a lot of visibility into why it was chosen, so that's my speculation. So why do we care about any of this? Because if you're like me, when you were using Ember Data in the past, you just did like a model and it just works. Why do we need to know anything about any of this? Well, you're right, it does just work if you use JSON API, but if you don't, there's a lot of things that won't work. And that's because, as I mentioned, Ember Data uses JSON API behind the scenes. So everything gets converted to JSON API at some point. And you won't need any custom adapters or serializers or any of that kind of stuff if you correctly adhere 100% to JSON API. But that's not very realistic. Most APIs, even when they are JSON API, are only 90% JSON API, and there's edge cases and things you need to handle. And in worst cases, you're nowhere close to JSON API or any kind of REST standard. It's just kind of the Wild West, and you have a lot of stuff you need to do. So we're going to talk about some of the things you can do to work with these kind of non-standard APIs. And first, we're just going to kind of talk about adapters versus serializers, and what do you use each for? What's the difference? Then we'll talk a little bit about handling errors gracefully. So when you have an error from your API, your whole app doesn't just blow up and not work anymore. We'll talk a little bit about custom normalization and serialization so that you can really massage your data and make it look how you want for Ember Data and for your API as well. And we'll go through some of the common hooks and methods that you might use in a serializer or an adapter to achieve these things. So first up, we got adapters versus serializers. I was trying to find a good way to represent these things as something that you can relate to in the real world. So most people have probably, if you don't have one of the newer MacBooks, have at least noticed that they have, only USB-C, and you need all kinds of adapters and dongles and things to make things work. So this is really just, you want to plug something into your computer. So you're not changing the data going back and forth really, you're just saying, make it work with my computer, please. Like, let me plug it in. And this is kind of the same with adapters and Ember Data. You're not really going to want to change the data a lot in those. They're more for saying like my, the host for the API is this, the namespace is this is how you talk to the API. But then a serializer is like this pasta maker here. So you've got dough going in one side, and then the other side you have pasta coming out, which is the thing you want to use and consume. So serializers are like that. They take your data and change it all to the format you want for your app for Ember Data, which is close to JSON API. And then when you give it back to your API, you can change it back to whatever format they happen to be using. So in adapters, I mentioned there you do things like customize the host, the namespace, the path, etc. Anything you need to tell it how to hit the right endpoint when you do like save on your model. They have async capabilities where serializers don't, which is a big gotcha that got me a lot of times. So if you need to like combine several API requests into one response, you may want to do it in an adapter. So here's an example of what an adapter would look like. Typically, you would have either the JSON API, or REST adapter as your application adapter, and then you would extend that based on each model and if it needed different things to happen. So here, we're setting the namespace, and maybe you were working on your API and then you changed to a new version and format, so you want everything in your new stuff to have this different namespace. So you'll hit that and it'll know where to go. And then we're using find belongs to do another request to the store to find a record of a different type, and then we're adding that into the response we already had. So this is like what I mentioned before. If you have several async things you want to do and combine them together, you could do it with something like this. So serializers are used to massage the data responses sent to and from the API. They have several hooks available, which we'll go over in a little bit. And they all do things at different times so that you can decide when you want your data transformed and when you don't. And you can also do things like use embedded records mixin to say the data for a relationship is included with this response, and nice things like that. So here's an example of a serializer, and this one's using the JSON serializer and the embedded records mixin, and it has a bar relationship that says it's embedded, so we know that's going to be in the response. And then it does some stuff in the serialize hook to remove some random records or delete some data or these kind of things to massage the request so that get rid of extra stuff you don't need. So, handling errors gracefully. We had an issue in the past few months. I was working a lot on Ember Data stuff, and we had a case where we needed a model that had a belongs to relationship needed to come back as not, needed to be able to request it, and when it 404'd, handle that instead of just blowing up. So if you're using JSON API, it would just give you an empty collection with still a 200, so your app is going to keep working. But with other types of APIs, you might get a 404, which makes your whole app stop, which is not good for the user, obviously. So to get around this, we're going to manually catch it and create a default record instead. We're going to do this in the find belongs to hook. And for this example, we're going to be using a person address relationship. So in our person model, we have just a simple belongs to with address. It's async, so it loads itself automatically. And the address model has a lot of things you would expect to be in an address. The line 1, line 2, they're all strings. And it has the inverse relationship to the person. So the magic here is in the adapter. and we're using the find belongs to method and doing the normal request, which is going to try to get the address. It's going to 404, and then we return this empty object here of just nulls for all the types of things you would see in the address. And this is going to allow us to edit these fields in the model without needing to create another model and adding things together and that kind of things, and catch the error and make everything nice. So now we're going to talk a little about custom normalization and serialization. So in the same project, it was different models, but we had a need for some ad hoc relationships with Ember Data. So we had a parent, and so in this use case here, we're going to talk about a website which has many pages, and pages can have page view stats. And all of the data for the page view stats is loaded via the website model as one API call with everything for every page, which is good because you have one API call and you're not doing a ton of API calls to the server. But what if you want to access it at the page and know what's associated with the page? So we manually are setting up a relationship here under page for page view stats that belong to that page from the has many of the website. So we have this website model, and it has a has many of page view stats, and it's async, and that's basically all it has right now. So, but the URL for this was non-standard as well, so we needed to use a serializer and manually add in links under the website for page view stats, where it will hit that non-standard URL to grab that that has many relationship. And we're doing it in normalize find all response and normalize find record response. And this is just for if you are requesting several websites, it does the find all, or if you're just doing one, it's the find record. But then we're not actually using that relationship from website, so we need to manually trigger the has many. So when we load it in the model hook, we're calling website.hasmany pageviewstats.load, and this is going to force that relationship to load and pull things in. So then we have our page model and page view stat model, and the page model sets up a relationship for page view stats, and similarly the page view stat model just sets up the inverse relationship to page. And then we do the magic in the serializer here for page view stat. So when it gets the response, it normalizes it and adds, if it's a find many or find has many request, it goes and adds the relationship to the page on the page ID from the resource. So then we have the best of both worlds. We can load everything from the website as one big request, and then we can still access everything from page.pageviewstats for the individual pages. And we can do things like for each through the pages and have a nice table and show all the stats, and everything is nicely coupled together.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So when you have a situation like that where it would be like a bunch of work to try to massage something into a Ember Data relationship, or I guess like another approach you could take is to just kind of make computed properties to kind of accomplish a similar thing. How do you weigh kind of those options? And
so in this case, in the project I was working on for all of these things, I just wanted to keep it all in Ember Data because I wanted to. So I wasn't really weighing the costs, benefit, that kind of thing. But yeah, you would definitely, if it's going to take you months to get it in Ember Data and you can do it in Computeds in a couple of weeks or something, you may want to look into that. But I think knowing how to do this lets you decide which you want to do.
Got it.
So some of the hooks we've been mentioning, we're going to just briefly look through some of the things, the hooks that are defined for adapters and serializers and how you might use them. So the base adapter has create record, delete record, and update record. And as you might guess, those are for creating, updating, and deleting records. And things like find all and find record. And these are the methods you'll use to query for records. So if you need to do something custom, when that happens, you can tweak that sort of functionality there. One common thing that we had in our API is it uses post for everything for some reason. So to update, we had to do a create record and update record that both manually used Ember Ajax called post for everything, used our URL we gave it and passed the data in there. So then anytime you save your record, whether it's a new one or updating, it's always going to post. So the base serializer has just a few methods, I guess because you're supposed to use one of the other ones or implement your own. But it has normalized response, which takes the payload from the server and converts it to something, a JSON API compliant document. And it's only executed when you do an explicit API call for that resource type. So if you're like trying to massage data for a relationship you've forced in the previous things we did, it might not work. So you have to do it in the parent and pass all this stuff down. So serialize is like the opposite of normalize. It's for when you want to send the data back to the server. It's going to convert everything back to whatever format your server needs. And I like to think they both start with S, serialize and server, and that's how I remember which is which. Yeah. So then if you get into the custom serializers that are, well, not really custom, the provided ones, but like the more implemented ones, they have a lot of different hooks and things for more specific types, like normalize find all response and normalize find record response instead of just normalize response. So you can use these to do the same normalization, but only during a single record or multiple record case. Similar things with serialize belongs to and serialize has many. They're going to allow you to do serialization for belongs to and has many relationships for the single and multiple use case. So this is an example of using normalize find all response and normalize find record response. And it's just going through and setting the manual links like I think we did earlier, pretty similar to that. Yeah.
Do you know, does the REST serializer just sort of have an implementation of normalized response that calls these?
I think yes. I don't know about all the internals necessarily, but that sounds right. And that's it. Thanks. Yeah, I can do questions.
We have a question or two.
Okay, so one of the most annoying parts of Ember Data customization is when you have an API that returns one thing when it asks for all the records, but returns the whole record when you ask for that one record. How do you like to deal with that situation?
So I guess you would use, it depends. So if you had a format you wanted it to be, or is it JSON API at all, or?
Yeah, it's kind of REST, but it's
so like on, sorry.
Let's just say,
like does
let's say we had
or the multiple
we're talking
record
about
case
like
work?
Partial records where
Okay.
your record might say let's say it's a person record, and if you just ask for all the people, it only returns their names. But if you ask for the single person, it returns a bunch of other fields like address and phone number and whatever else.
Okay. So I guess you would need to do some kind of multiple requests there, and you could do that in the adapters, I guess. Because if you just have the name, or if you had an ID at least, you could then do a query for the rest of their data with the single request you were talking about for each of the ones you have in the thing, and then mash it all into the response and send it back that way. Does that sound like what you were asking?
Yes, but the problem is when you've loaded all the records, Ember Data thinks you have all the data and you don't.
Right. So you can like manually unload records if you need to. I've done that a lot, where we had like some things where we would generate like those default records we were talking about earlier. We would generate a ton of default records that had negative IDs, and we would unload everything that had negative IDs after the fact and like replace it with real stuff. So you could do something like that, I guess. I don't know if that's the best answer or not, but.
Can I ask a question? How do you, when you're writing serializers and adapters, how do you do testing?
I didn't. Yeah. Manually, no tests. Like some unit tests, if you knew the exact input and output format, to just make sure the format is the same. But yeah, in terms of like doing an acceptance test or that kind of thing, didn't really do any of that.
Cool. Thank you very much, Rob.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Ollie, would you like to get set up? Tell a joke? I got a vamp. Oh, I should have brought my guitar. It would have worked better. Interesting. Ooh, no.
What's the most hilarious thing that's happened to you in the last 5 months?
Being a
like, I don't know, unexpected, people matter, or I don't know, unplanned. I don't know, Something entertaining must have happened 5 months with a new baby.
Yeah, I'll try and come up with something for next time.
Wow. I know your life has not been that boring the last 5 months.
Definitely has not. Yeah. So while he gets wired up here, our next talk is going to be Ollie Griffiths. Are you giving?
We live?
All right.
He's not even got his headphones on. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know.
Oh no, it's all going wrong.
Okay, Ollie, joining us now is going to be Ollie Griffiths, who's going to give us a lightning talk on Broccoli here before we take a break before Dianne gives us the last talk of the evening. Ollie gave his first talk on Broccoli at EmberConf 2 years ago.
Yeah,
so 2 years
sounds
ago?
right.
Yeah, so he is NYC's resident Broccoli expert, and in 5 minutes, he's going to tell us all you would need to know. Take it away, Ollie.
All right. Cool. So first of all, hello, everyone. My name is Ollie Griffiths. I work for Tumblr. I don't do JavaScript by day. I do it by night. So I decided, for whatever reason, that I wanted to get involved in Broccoli because, I don't know, nobody in Ember seemed to want to get involved in it, and everybody was like, what the hell is Broccoli? So I've been working on it for probably about just over a year now to make things better, to add documentation, etc. So the first thing is this snazzy new website. So this website is at broccoli.build. Hopefully, I mean, you can't see, but yeah, broccoli.build. It's one of those new fancy, I don't know, what was it, 2017, 2016 when they released all those new domains. We've got our broccoli.build. Go there, check it out. We've got several guides, a little bit about what Broccoli is and how it works. There's some getting started guides, etc., and abouts, and so on. So go check it out. Hopefully this will give you a bit of info about why Broccoli is cool, why it's good, why we want to use it in Ember, and should give you the basics for the sort of getting started for using Broccoli. So what am I here to talk to you today about? Well, Broccoli has just recently had a few updates. So here's an example Brach file. Now, the Brach file in Broccoli parlance is like your Ember CLI build file. They are essentially the same thing. And basically this file is a JavaScript file within which you pull in various different plugins and you build a kind of a tree or like a graph of inputs that go to one another and eventually produce some kind of output. So when you run Ember build, it runs through a whole bunch of different plugins converting ES6 JavaScript into ES5 stuff that will run in your browser. You might do things like compressing your images or compiling Sass into CSS, etc. You should all be fairly familiar with Ember CLI and kind of what it does for you. So under the hood, Ember CLI uses Broccoli. And recently, in the last sort of 6 months or so, we upgraded Ember to use the latest version of Broccoli, which is Ember 2.0. Now, Broccoli 2.0. So Ember CLI, I think it's like 3.4, 3.5, something around there is when we switched to using Broccoli 2.0. One of the major benefits of Broccoli 2.0, which you may not have been aware of, is that when you type Ember build or Ember serve, you may have noticed a directory in your project called TMP, and there was like a ton of files in there. Now the problem with that directory was that a lot of editors would try and like index the files in that directory, so your CPU would be like, oh my god, there's tons of new files and they're all changing all over the place, and firing off like change notification events for all of those, and your CLI is trying to index all those changes. So that was bad. And then the second thing was, because it's in like your project directory or user directory or something like that, the file system is sending off like tons of this file change, that file change notifications, which really weren't being read by anything or going anywhere. So what we did was we moved that temp directory to the system temp directory, and performance should have increased, hopefully, in your application. We've seen sort of reports of like 30, 40% performance increases just by moving that directory. So if you haven't upgraded to the latest Ember CLI, please do so. You will get this for free, which is cool. So here's some of the new stuff, which hasn't landed in Ember yet, but hopefully some of this stuff is kind of already in Ember, and some of this stuff will come in the future. So first things first, here's a simple Brach file, kind of what your Ember CLI build file kind of might look like. And we're using the Broccoli merge trees plugin, and all this does is like take two directories and effectively like merge them together. It's kind of like r-syncing two directories into one. So we've got, can everybody at the back see? We're good? Cool. So yeah, so we take two directories, source A and source B, and we just merge their contents in together. Pretty bog standard, nothing particularly exciting about this build file. But one of the things that Ember CLI does is it, rather than just exporting the result of this merge operation, it actually exports a function. So that was the first thing that we've recently added to Broccoli. And this is basically to try and make sure that the sort of the APIs and the usage patterns between Broccoli and Ember CLI start to look similar. So if we go ahead and build this, let's increase that. So we do Broccoli build. Cool, so that's built, and we should see in our dist directory, we've got a.js and b.text, which are the files which are within the A folder and the B folder. So we've got a.js and b.text, and those are in here. And we can see that contains a bit of JavaScript, and that looks exactly the same as our a.js. We've literally just copied the files. So pretty straightforward stuff. So this is the first step into making the Broccoli build file work in the same way as Ember CLI. Now, the reason why we wanted to do this is to support a second feature. So the Ember CLI build file gets passed a hash that contains various build time options. And one of those build time options is environment. So you think, sometimes you're going to be building for dev, sometimes you're building for prod, sometimes you're building for testing, and you might want to include different things for the different build environments. So for example, when you're building for production, you might want to minify your assets to shrink the size of your CSS and your JavaScript files down as much as possible. So here's one I prepared earlier. Oops, this one. We just copy that out. So what we've got here is we've still got our merge happening at the end here, but instead of just merging the two together, we've now got a conditional in here. So we've got options.env, and options.env is pre-populated by default with development as a string, unless you supply one of a few command line options. So let's go ahead and have a look and see what this does. To note, if it is production, then we're going to uglify or minify our JavaScript. And we use the Broccoli uglify source map plugin to do that. So here we've taken our source/a directory. If it's production, we run it through uglify, and then after that, we merge the result together. So kind of similar to what we did before, but we're doing an extra step if we are building for production. So let's go ahead and build that. Broccoli builds override. Now there's a couple of options here. So we can do environment equals production.
Over, what did I do? Over WRIT.
Cool. So that's built. And if we look at our output, our dist directory here, we can see that it did not work. And the reason it didn't work is because I didn't save that file. Let's try again. So if we look at our dist directory here, we'll see that we've got a compressed version of our, or uglified version of our basic JavaScript file. So this was the original. We've got an uglified version, and we've also got a source map in here as well. So that's worked, all looking good. We can also supply any other arbitrary value in here that you want. You could do foo, whatever, and you can switch on that within your build file. That obviously won't do anything in this case because we're only checking for production. There are some other shorthands. So instead of typing out environment equals production, you can just do prod. And that will have exactly the same result. If we look at our JS file, we see exactly the same result. So all looking good there. So now we have the ability to switch on production, different environments. One of the other features that is now present in Broccoli is the ability to use ES modules. So you should be fairly familiar with using ES modules in Ember CLI now. It's kind of the standard out of the box. So instead of using merge equals require Broccoli merge trees, we can use the modern import syntax that Node will support at some point. It's currently still experimental, but at some point in the future, this syntax will become the de facto, and it looks a little something like this. So instead of our const, I can show you, instead of const merge equals require, we've got import merge from Broccoli merge trees. And this all just works exactly the same way to you. No difference whatsoever. If we look at the dist directory, we'll find exactly the same output. Everything kind of just works, which is super cool. You don't really have to do anything. And we've got a question on the floor. That is not using Babel behind the scenes. That is using, it is a package called npm.js/ESM. So it's this on-the-fly ESM conversion library which hooks into the Node resolution, module resolution system and provides on-the-fly transpilation of that syntax. So basically you just require this ESM package, you pass it the default module object, which you would have been provided in your file that is including the ESM package. And then instead of doing a regular require, it's basically shimmed it, so it like hooks into it, and then require from then on in will work, and import will work, and so on. It's some kind of black magic. I don't really know how it works, but it's great. We've got it now included in Broccoli 2.1. And so from your point of view, instead of using the common JS syntax, you can now use the ESM syntax, which is pretty cool. Another question.
So that means like you could use this for any NPM module in the Brach file here?
Yes. So any NPM module which conforms to common JS, you can import in this fashion.
And then you can import, so you're using the default import here to get the whole module.
Yep.
And that corresponds to the whole module. Can you do like named imports?
You can
also?
do named imports as
and
well.
those are sort of properties on the module
those are the
with a
properties on the
simple
module, yeah.
translation?
If we just go back to here. So there should be something here about named imports. Yeah, there's some support for named imports, but I'm pretty sure it's just the regular named import structure. That because the way that CommonJS exports, exports a thing, if you have properties on that thing, you can named import them, I think. It's just a POJO, essentially, module.exports, and it can be anything. In this case, what it's importing is the default module exports. So merge here is the function that is exported from Broccoli merge trees. And your editor should take you to that as well, exactly as you would expect. Any other questions? Cool. OK, so that is the state of play as things are now. However, we've got a little feature in development to make life even better, like ESM. And one more thing. ESM is cool. It's the new syntax, but there's like the new syntax, or the new thing. So if you haven't used TypeScript yet, TypeScript is the new. So instead of a brockfile.js, and if I go, can I actually see this? Rename. If we change this to a brockfile.ts, oh my God, what's going on here? OK, so it kind of looks almost exactly the same. The only thing that's actually changed here is this line here, where instead of, well, this wasn't here before. So instead of this, so options could be anything. Like it could be a string, it could be an integer, it could be a POJO, it could be a function. We really don't know. We're just kind of looking at the API docs and going, it's a POJO, so I guess it probably has an options.env property on it. We're crossing our fingers that it works. But if we want to actually be sure about these things, TypeScript allows us to actually be sure about these things. And the program will not run, won't compile, unless our code actually checks out. And the things that we are expecting it to be are the things that it actually is, if that makes sense. So one thing that Broccoli now, or will do, hopefully, if this pull request gets approved, so caveats, it will be approved in some form, hopefully. You will be able to write a brockfile.ts, and one of the things that you'll be able to import from the Broccoli package is this brockfile options. And on brockfile options, there is currently a single property called env. And in the future, there will hopefully be more properties. I'm hopefully looking to add support to include the name of your package from your package JSON, other sort of environmental things that you might want to use as part of your build. Maybe you want to output some kind of header that tells you what application you're building. I mean, that would be kind of useful. So when you type Ember build in the wrong folder and forget that you've changed to a different directory and you've built the wrong app and you're like refreshing, like, why doesn't this look any different? Because I built the wrong thing. You would know things like that. So currently this only has a single property, which is env, which is defined as a string. And this comes from our -- environment. So this allows when we run our build, it to error. And the reason it errors is because I just got a new laptop and I didn't install TypeScript. So if you imagine in your head, I typed broccoli build and it ran this, it would have built and produced exactly the same output. Unfortunately, I didn't do that before this talk. I'm several glasses of wine and a couple of beers in, so I forgot to do that. And that is pretty much the end of my talk. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Did Broccoli always support arbitrary environments, or was it just development, test, and prod for a while?
Broccoli never supported environments. So
Okay.
there is your answer. There are two packages, Broccoli Stew and Broccoli Env, that both support a CLI argument of an environment variable, weirdly, an environment variable to define the environment within which Broccoli builds. So a CLI environment, Broccoli _env, and that would allow it to flow through. But I was like, that's kind of sucky, and we've done it better in Ember, so let's just do the same thing in Broccoli, and we can deprecate that.
Yeah. Now, Ember CLI has been limited to like 3 environments for a while. Is that true?
Pass. I don't know. Can anyone answer that?
True.
Yes?
True.
Heads are nodding.
So
Broccoli...
I'm hoping for that to bubble up.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I'm not the person to make that happen, but... yes. Was there a...
All right. Thank
That's
you, Ollie.
it? Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Do you still have tickets for your training?
Yes.
Yes.
I haven't checked.
Ooh.
But
Will people
seeing
get-
as you're here, I can sneak you in the back door. So...
And
All right.
everyone online.
And everyone online.
All right.
You too.
Okay, so we're going to take a 10-minute break before Dianne gives us our last talk of the evening and sends us out. For those of us watching on the internet, hello internet right now,
Hi, internet.
we're actually going to shut off the stream for you since this is a preview EmberConf talk. So you'll have to wait until EmberConf.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya. Yeah, for everyone else, 10 minutes, and then we'll start off. Thank you.